it's general election next week, meaning December the 12th, 2019.
Yeah.
What issues to you, as a pupil at Stewards Academy, what issues are important to you?
I think a really important issue is social housing, because a lot of people in Harlow live in, well, there's converted office blocks, basically, but whole families have to live in these really small spaces, and there's just not enough kind of council houses to...
So what's wrong with converting, there's a lack of housing, a businessman comes along, sees an office block, thinks, I'll convert them into housing. I'm getting homeless people off the street. What's wrong with that?
Well, it's just, there's not enough space to have a whole family in these really cramped spaces.
Anybody agree with Elias on that issue? Young lady just nodding your head there. So what could you do? So you've got people living in office blocks all over Harlow, from up at the Green Pinnacles area, the industrial estates, Terminus House, etc. What do you do?
Well, I mean, the obvious thing would be to build more suitable housing, because when it comes to houses and office blocks, there are different requirements of what is legally accepted. It might be whether it's space, whether it's the materials you use to build the buildings. It's going to be different for a house than it is an office block. So even if we refurbish these places and give people temporary housing, even just renovating them and giving them more suitable places to live would be an improvement, and I think we should take any kind of improvement we can when it comes to this problem.
Why?
Because people deserve a place to live. Having a home is lovely, and I love my house. It's very full, there's a lot of people in it, but we have enough space to function. We have enough space so that we can have our own space. Even though there's somebody in the next room, we're still able to kind of be by ourselves, and we shouldn't have to be around people all the time. Some people are very introverted, some people are extroverted, but everybody deserves their own space, whether that's in school, out of school, but everybody deserves a place to function.
You look at the events in London, 2 people killed last Friday across London Bridge. Should that be an issue for the politicians?
I believe it should be an issue for the politicians, because the person that did this was a person that should have still been in jail, but it was released early. And I think there should be reforms there, that people that could still do this kind of thing, are still at risk, should still remain in jail, and that our internal security from these kind of threats should be improved.
So what would be your question to each candidate about terror attacks?
What are you planning to do to improve the security and make sure that these kind of people aren't available to just do this?
Do you get the feeling, though, that it's quite complicated trying to keep people in prison, how much it costs to keep people in prison? The whole thing sounds very complicated to you.
Yeah, certainly I see why that would be an issue.
Seven, do you want to come in here?
I just think it's like a horrible event that's happened, and I think that they really do need to look at the security of the country and the security of just, like in Harlow, you have to look at the security. You have to make sure that there's CCTV around so you can make sure you can convict people of crimes. There's enough police around to actually enforce rules and see what's happening, because I feel like it's a huge issue that there's not enough police, like people on the police force in the country. And I think there needs to be just simple things like the CCTV, like more lighting around streets and small alleyways and everything, more lighting, so you feel that sense of security when you're walking home or when you're out and about anywhere, and I think that's really important.
So if you ask, for example, the Conservative candidate, Robert Halfon, you say you cut 21,000 police between 2010 and 2019, and he'll say we had no money. Yeah. It's basically like a bank account, like you're running a house. Do you think that's an acceptable answer?
I think it comes down to what you put as your priorities, and if you're going to look at, if crime's a real problem, which I feel like it's a huge problem, that you need to make sure you see your priorities and decide what is going to be on top and what you need to actually change.
Jake, when you talk about people talking about the police or the criminal justice system, what do you want out of a police force that politicians can influence?
Personally, for a police force, I want them to be well aware of the situations they're going into, and I also want the police force to be well equipped and well staffed. Because personally, if their police force is not well staffed and they aren't well equipped, the situations they're going to handle are going to be even harder on the people and themselves, which I personally believe is rather dangerous, and it doesn't help anyone out in this situation at all. So personally, for an MP, I would like them to kind of focus on like helping the police, because it helps us out as well.
Can you, I mean, I don't know the answer to this, can you pluck a figure out? I mean, you've got a town of, 80,000 people here. How many police do you think there should be, say, for a shift? Say between 2 p.m. and 10 p.m. at night?
There needs to be at least, I'd say, 2,000.
2,000?
2,000, I feel, because this is... you can't be too safe, I feel, really, personally. Because
So would it surprise you that just a couple of years ago they had, on one particular evening, a police officer from Harlow tweeted, "I am the only warranted, not PCSO, not special constables, who are volunteers, I'm the only police officer operating in Harlow tonight."
that, personally, to me, that it kind of scared me. I'm kind of scared, and it kind of... I wouldn't say I'm surprised, but at the same time, it's not something you want to think about when it's something like that, because you want more than one person out there to protect you.
Esther, do you know the difference between the parties?
Well, personally, I know a vague outline for most parties, and I feel like that's kind of how most of our generation is, because we're so young in the eyes of laws that we aren't exactly expected to know everything about every party, so we kind of don't put it as a priority. We put more things as social and school things as our priorities. But I think it's very important that we are able to establish what the different parties' goals and aspirations are.
But you must watch television, listen to the radio. Do you know do you look at Boris Johnson and Jeremy Corbyn and think, I think they believe different things?
Yes, because it's not from... I personally I'm not a big avid news watcher, but I do see headlines and I do hear different adults and different students talking about the issues that they have come across, that they've seen online, and you definitely can notice the different perspectives that these politicians have and their views.
Okay, do you know the difference between the parties? Do you feel they're different?
I mean, I know that they have different views on how they would, like to run the country, but I personally don't know a massive deal between, I don't know the main difference between them. But by watching the news, because I watch the news every morning before I come to school, just to know what's going on in the world, I get a vague idea of, what for example, Boris Johnson wants to do and what Jeremy Corbyn wants to do, and I know they have different opinions. So.
What do you think of the general election in 2019? Are you interested in it?
Yeah, I'm interested to see how the population votes and if the population votes, because, with the Brexit vote, only about a third of the country actually voted, which means 2/3 of the country didn't get to give their opinion on the matter, and that kind of shocks me a little bit. So I'd like to see the population give a little bit more.
I think I just said that we held a question time, and of the 105 minutes, only 7 were on Brexit. With over 220 people from Harlow in the hall. Does that surprise you?
Yeah, a little bit, because not many people nowadays still know, they have no idea what Brexit is or what it means. People say Brexit means Brexit, but what does that mean? I don't quite, I don't get it.
You don't get it?
No.
But you can understand why, though, because
Yeah.
there are so many other issues that are important. For example, crime. If we can't protect our streets, like if people are dying, we're not going to have a country to have Brexit with. There are just going to be criminals and people running about, and that's not going to lead to a very safe country. But on the other hand, you have to think about the fact that Brexit will change everything. Like, it could change so many different parts of our economy that it does need to be talked about, but there are other issues that overshadow it, so it's a bit like there's good arguments to why you should and why you shouldn't talk about it.
I feel like Brexit isn't the main priority of this country at the minute, really.
Yeah.
In all fairness, because, we've said about crime, and that does kind of, top Brexit, because going through Brexit, you know, in the end, that's our future. So, you know.
And it affects a lot of people's lives because you're not only looking at the future of the country and what's good for the country and the economy, you're also looking at individuals' lives and how people have to deal with that, and people who are not going to have a life in this country anymore, or have to move back to their country, or will lose everything because of this whole scheme that I'm sure even the politicians don't even know what Brexit is. They don't know how to deal with it, and it's difficult for people that are going to be so greatly affected by it, because the politicians are promising hard Brexit, promising all these different values, but no one's done this before. So they don't know how it's going to play out, and then you're sitting there and you're like, well, what's going to happen to me? And it's just difficult when it affects you so much.
Do you think for most people, I'll go over here again now, do you think for most people when they talk about Brexit, well, the day we leave, whenever that is, or if that is, you know, as long as the sky's, next morning people probably wake up and their house will still be there and the sky will be there, and so they'll just probably take it in football parlance one day at a time. Do you think that's where most people will approach it?
Yes. Yeah, but with that, I feel like most changes, you don't see the effects of them immediately, and that can be for the people who are living in that time, in that moment of those changes, they won't feel that difference. But in 20 years' times, when people look at the statistics and the general feelings of the citizens, they will see that difference and they wonder why, and if it's an improvement or if it was a bad decision in the end.
Okay. Next subject is the NHS. So I can see your badge, Megan.
Yes.
NHS. What's your concerns about the NHS, if any?
I mean, I think it's severely underfunded. Again, going back to the reason of if everybody is sick and if everybody can't get healthcare, how are we going to have a healthy enough country to function? But I did my work experience within the NHS, and I worked in a department that didn't handle patients, and you could tell so distinctly in the hospital where they handled patients and where they didn't. I explained it as in like walking into a graveyard, going through the hospital, going to where they're dealing with less and less patients, and then going out through the back to where they don't handle patients. And it was like a different world completely. And I think people think of NHS and they think of patients and like people, but there are people that don't handle people as well. And the department I worked in, if that department wasn't there, the hospital wouldn't have been able to function, because it provided so many vital things for the saving lives. If that department wasn't there, the hospital wouldn't be a hospital because it couldn't help anybody. And so I think it just needs to be funded as a whole instead of focusing on how we treat patients. Maybe we should focus also on the other hand of how we treat the people that treat the patients, because without the people that treat the patients, we can't treat the patients.
So we're talking about health service specifically in Harlow. So the good news is that Harlow will get a new hospital. That's
Yes.
good news, isn't it?
Yes, especially considering, I mean, I've got a lot of friends who have done silly things in the past that have led to hospital visits, and especially considering there's a population increase, we're going to have more people, it's a very inevitable thing. Having another hospital will be a great aid, but the other side of it is that if it doesn't get the funding it needs, it won't work effectively.
So just sorry, another question for you. But would you care if it was another completely new hospital, say off the new Junction 7A, you know, off past Old Harlow on that road round there, brand new spanking new hospital, or a rebuild where Princess Alexandra Hospital is? Does that matter?
I think yes, because some people having it in a different location might help. Being able to potentially put new facilities in this new hospital might help. And again, it does, having more space in general to put patients in will help the general stress that Princess Alexandra is under. I've been to that hospital many times, and I mean, I had to go there for blood tests, and even you'd have to wait an hour. Like a classic example, I went in there and the number that was on like the ticket machine was 75 and I was number 20. and I had to wait there for an hour and a half because there were so many people in there. So I just think giving more space for people to go will completely ease any stress that we have already.
So we're talking about Princess Alexandra as we're talking about health issues here, etc. We're only across the road from Lister House Surgery, and lots of people say they just can't get an appointment. So that's not a great thing.
Yeah, but again, the other side of that is some things don't require a hospital. If you have a cold, that doesn't require a hospital. But I mean, I've had very good experiences with that practice. I know other people haven't, but
Yeah, I mean, I haven't had the best of experiences with that practice, but I mean, people have to wait like weeks upon weeks upon weeks just to get an appointment, and you know, for me, I've got some back issues, and I go to the doctors usually first to check it out, and I had to wait nearly 2 months to get an appointment, and I just thought that was a bit off, really. It didn't feel right.
So Kai, what's your questions to the candidates then? What's, you know, when it comes to the National Health Service or cert provision, what's your question?
I mean, I think it would probably be make more. Like, would you make more to decrease the waiting times for people? Because it's a real problem.
Esther, if you want to go to university, you're going to have to pay a hell of a lot of money to go for tuition fees, etc. Does that concern you?
Personally, it really does, because education should be it is a human right and it feels like it's been cut off at this age now. So once you pass the age of 18, it's not anymore, and it's almost a luxury to do it. But we need people with education for so many jobs, for teaching jobs, for scientists in medicine, and for engineers. And if those people who have the motivation to do those jobs don't have the money or the access to do those jobs, to go to that school to get that education, what's going to happen when we start seeing a decrease in those workers in those fields that we badly need?
So how many people in your year, sorry, I know you haven't done a head count, but how many people in your year you think want to go to university?
I would say a good 80, 60 people would want
Yeah.
to go, because we all would like to have big ambitions, and to have those big ambitions we need those big titles, those degrees, those PhDs, and so it's just something that we want to aspire to, and looking realistically at those prices is just kind of disheartening.
And you're almost open mouth when you find out that, you know, 40 years ago, as I said, someone like myself, you know, got paid a full grant, you know, and you know, for your rent for your place at uni and travel. That, do you think, you must be thinking, what happened to that?
I am. I'm not quite sure exactly what the change was and why it came along. I think it should be not better explained, but just more widely known why it happened, and so that people can build their own opinion and make a judgment for themselves and see if it was justified.
Yeah. Carrying on.
So personally, with my eyes on education, I've talked to my parents about this, and because whilst we're okay, it would be hard to get to university, and I think that it's saddening, because I want to go to university, and I think I'll try my hardest to, but the thing is, it's limited. It's put behind a wall for only those that can pay for it, which is hard, I'd say, because there'd be so many more people available for the jobs that are like understaffed for say like hospitals. But you need to like teach these people, but you cannot teach these people if they cannot learn themselves, because of the fact that they're put behind because of the money they don't have, which I feel is unfair.
I think some, for example, Conservative MPs, candidates, I think would say that you don't have to pay back until you start earning a certain amount of money. Is that an acceptable answer?
I still feel you're still paying for something that I feel like you're giving back to society by becoming a doctor, I'd say.
But why should Harlow taxpayers pay for you to swan around at university for 3 years?
And that is a perfectly fair argument, but at the same time, I still feel with like the amount it costs as well. It's not just it has to cost; it's the amount, and like especially like housing there. Say you go to a university that is not close to your home, you have to pay for housing, and it just becomes a lot on the person, especially at that time, I'd say, and then onwards as well, because you have to pay for many other things. And I feel I'd say it's kind of sad and hard at the same time, and I would like it if maybe you don't have to abolish it, but at least make the pay lower for it.
Kai, immigration. Harlow is one of the fastest growing non-UK born populations in the whole country. That's a good thing, isn't it?
Yeah, personally, I think that's a good thing because it shows that Harlow is multicultural, and it shows that, you know, people want to come to not only Harlow but, you know, this country. And I think that's a good thing personally.
You all think that's a good thing?
Yeah. I think it's great that there are multiple people that can bring skills from different walks of life and bring them to the country for us to reap the rewards of that. And there might not be many people in this country that aspire to be doctors, but there's doctors in other countries and people who've studied abroad in their home country and then come over and shared their expertise over here. Like, I know that one of the teachers at Stewards, she got her degree in veterinary studies in Ukraine, and she's come over here and she's sharing her knowledge and literally giving us knowledge in biology and teaching us and helping us bring those skills forward into later life.
Do you feel there's some sort of rainbow nation here in Stewards? I was at the Education Progress Awards last night down in the Playhouse in Stewards, and you just felt, you know, different students, all different countries. Is that a good thing? Even in Stewards, etc.
Because at Stewards, I feel that even if you look at certain years and you still see that they are still definitely a minority, that minority is not pushed away and shunned. It's almost put into the spotlight, not as a prize trophy, oh, we have minorities. It's more of a, they are part of us and they have a voice just as everyone else has, and that minority is using that voice to the best of their abilities.
But should you put a cap on immigration? I mean, one of the questions on our question time was about, should you put a cap on immigration? Should there be a free movement? And that's, again, we're going to the Brexit thing, aren't we?
Yeah.
What do you think?
I don't feel like it's too much of an issue to me, because they keep saying they're stealing our jobs and such. But I've heard that, you know, they can make jobs, they can make businesses, and I don't feel personally that it's a bad thing that people are immigrating. And you can say there's overpopulation and whatever. I don't feel like it's like that.
You're Prime Minister tomorrow. You're making your speech outside 10 Downing Street, and you say, my first priority is...
increasing funding for the police, mainly, because crime is a very important issue, and we speak a lot about it here at Stewards with different assemblies. I all years get taught about it, so they know just what's around them. I think there needs to be more done about it.
Excellent, thanks.
More funding towards like care homes and stuff like that, because they need because there's the people there as well as the staff, they need help, because they're understaffed and they're working long hours, and I feel with more money we can make those facilities better.
That's a great answer, because we are an ageing population, and you must think, you know, how are we going to cope? How are we going to care?
I don't know how to answer with how we're going to cope, because it's just something time I think is going to have to tell itself, for me at least.
The Prime Minister tomorrow.
I believe that more money should be put into the defence budget, because there's been lots of cuts, you know, lots of pieces of military equipment being sold off to other countries, and especially post-Brexit, when we're going to be more isolated without the Union of Europe. I think it'd be incredibly important for us to be able to maintain our position of power on the global stage.
I would do a broad thing and just make sure that each finance department has the right person that is looking over what the money is being spent on and where it's coming from. Because with all these issues that we've discussed today, it's just been, we need more of this, because obviously we need more of that because obviously the attention has been diverted from that issue. So I feel like we need to, in general, reevaluate how the money's been spent and where it's going and why we need more.
I would put more funding into the NHS, because we're talking about all these issues and a lot of them are based around people, But if we can't, this is a bit extreme, but if we can't prevent these people from dying from illness, and if we can't prevent these people from, like, talking about care homes, giving them a support system so that they don't feel alone, we're not going to have people to worry about. Because essentially, this is, again, quite a bit morbid, if the doctors die because we don't have enough money put into the NHS so that we can't take care of them, who's going to take care of everyone else? So it's just more of a, if we can't protect the people, we don't have people issues to worry about.
Seven.
I think I'd also go with crime and just preserving the safety of everyone in the country, and because I think the number one priority for me would be how safe everyone feels. Like, on a small scale here in Stewards, how safe do you feel? Do you feel safe within the school gates? I want to feel safe within my country. I want to feel that I'm not going to be a victim to a crime because there isn't enough facilities or safety measures put in place that I'm safe to walk around at any point in the day and to make my way home, make my way to school without getting hurt in any sort of way.
And finally, Kai.
Yeah, I would probably put more funding into schools and for teachers, because without the teachers and the necessary facilities at school, we can't be educated. And without us being educated, how do we educate further people to become, to have a nicer population of people so we can improve, how crime is dealt with?